All right, it's now 5:04 on the 2nd of November 2020. I am now calling to order the Policy Committee meeting of the Belton Independent School District Board of Trustees. At this point, I am the only one present in terms of the members of the board. I believe Mr. Floor is on his way. I don't know, did you hear back from Rosie? No, okay. So Mr. Floor will be here shortly. Elizabeth, any public comments?
No, sir.
Okay. Then we'll move down and get started on our, I guess, item number 3 on the agenda. Review and discuss the following items: policies pertaining to a graduate profile.
All right, I'm excited to have this conversation this evening. The purpose of the presentation on the second slide is just to engage our board in a conversation, our committee in a conversation around the policy implications for the journey of a graduate. So we're beginning the process of developing our journey of a graduate, and just to get us started before we start diving into some potential policies that this might impact, just wanted to show an example. If we go to the next slide, you'll see this is just a sample of a journey of a graduate. There are many samples we could pull from across the country, actually. This is just an example. To give you an idea of visually, there will be some kind of visual depiction of our journey of a graduate. And so if you take a look at this one, this particular community, these were the attributes that really stood out when they were asked about the hopes and dreams and aspirations for their students as they go from pre-K to 12th grade through their system. And so in the next slide, I want to point out communication for an example. Communicator is one of the attributes of this particular journey of a grad. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see where they go through the development of this journey. And then in the next slide, there's an example of where, this is one school district's example, of where they take each of those attributes and really drill down into, but what do these actually mean? What do those words mean to that community? And so, for example, communicator was one of the ones I highlighted on there. In this document here, communicator, for example, really pulls out what's going to be the experience for students. And you'll see where it talks about, if I'm a student in this school system, I explore and exchange ideas with other learners. I grow my understanding to be an active listener. I honor the voices of other learners. I can express myself clearly in a variety of formats. And so this is just an example of how you take a journey of a graduate and start to then really define what those attributes mean. And so in the next slide, communicator is just blown up a little bit larger for you, and this is just an example of a rubric that this district developed. So it really took things like what's the learner behaviors if we're really growing the muscles around being a good communicator. Then you'll see everything from emerging, developing, all the way up to mastering, where this district really defines. So what's that look like when you're starting to grow those skills as a communicator, all the way up to what's mastering look like, where you communicate purposefully with different groups, adjusting medium and message based on the purpose in the audience. And so these are just to show you some tools that can accompany and some rubrics and things that will help us once we develop our journey of a graduate to actually bring the journey of a graduate to life. And so as we're thinking about this our own journey in developing the journey of a graduate, we know that there are potential policy implications that we wanted to just start a discussion and share some of these policies with you and just start to get some feedback on what's on your mind regarding these policies, what's most important to you. And so the very first one that I put up there is EH Local. This is a very vast, comprehensive local policy, and Connie, will you be able to pull that up for us?
Linda, while those are coming up, so just to add on, Manuel, on all of this, I think the key thing in the journey of a graduate is that it defines kind of the skills and experiences maybe that you want to develop in students throughout their K-12 or pre-K-12 journey in a school district. And it's unique to the school district. So for example, in the things that Melinda showed, there were some things in there about critical thinking skills. So as a school district, our community engaged in a process that said, we believe that developing critical thinking skills is necessary. We need to be able to track a way to ensure that our students are engaging in those opportunities all the time, and not just in the curriculum in the classroom, but also in the experiences that they might have through like some of our CTE student groups, et cetera, what's one of them? Like our ag program and stuff, and when they're showing animals and things like that. You develop skills and things along the way that are all part of an educational experience, but it's not something that you always have in a classroom within four walls in a learning that you get through the state standards. So this journey of a graduate really helps define not only the content learning that kids get, but what are the skill development and what are the experiences that we really want them to have before they leave our doors.
And I think I would just add to that it's whether we're talking about in a fine arts classroom, whether we're talking about on the court in athletics, whether we're talking about the math classroom, the pre-K classroom, we're being really intentional about the journey, because this is an educational journey our students are on in our system. And so a journey of a graduate impacts every single classroom, no matter the content or no matter the grade level.
Can I ask some questions?
Absolutely.
Yes.
When I went through these things today, and I looked at the example that you had given us, this comes from, does this come from a district in Virginia?
It does.
Okay. What's it called? Enrico?
Enrico County, Virginia.
Okay. So it's a school district in Virginia, which is the example, but that doesn't mean we're gonna adopt what they do.
Correct.
It's just an
Correct.
example of, you just kind of giving us an idea.
Yes, sir.
And in fact,
So-
we didn't use one from Texas just because we wanted to be able to say, we're not just gonna adopt somebody's from down the road. If this isn't just in the
Right,
state of
right.
Texas or in the state of Virginia or anywhere else, there's things like this throughout the nation.
So when I went through these policies that you guys had flagged for us, and I wrote down like creative thinker, quality character, global citizen, communicator, etc. If you read this stuff that we have, it's in there.
Mhm.
For example, quality character page is on page 26 of the stuff that you've provided us. So I'm gonna ask a rhetorical question. So if we already have it in here, I mean, it's not outlined like that, but if we already have it in here, why are we doing this?
So I would say a couple of reasons. First, this would help us set direction for the school district moving forward. So in essence, when we create a journey of a graduate, it helps create the vision of the school district. So as a trustee, and I know you've been on the board for a couple of years, but you haven't engaged in work where you've actually adopted the vision of the school district according to what the community input is, right? So this is the process that helps us adopt where we're moving forward in the future for Belton ISD. And I will say, yes, you're right, there are a lot of pieces of those things in some of these documents.
They're in here.
I would say that,
Yeah.
but I would also say that they're not explicit. And so when we specifically talk, and I think Melinda can talk in more depth about EH local and talk about what more explicit might look like after we define the journey of a graduate, I think that'll make more sense along the way. I do think that there are a lot of pieces in here, but you and I also know that these policies that are adopted in many cases are template policies from TASB that don't actually reflect the language and the needs of the local ISD that they serve. This is an opportunity for us to define the journey of a graduate and then look at our policies after that and say, how do these actual policies match up with what our community said is most important, and what tweaks do we need to make it more explicit?
I see, okay. So this is it Enrico?
Yes.
If I pronounced correctly. You know, when they have their, I guess what their goals would be, you know, you want to have, when a kid walks across the stage, you want to have him to have some skills in creative thinking, right? Ours may not necessarily be all of these that they have. It could be a little bit different, or it could be pretty close to the same. I mean, that's a pretty well-rounded kid, don't you think?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I mean, I don't think I was a creative thinker when I graduated, not because it's not, that's probably my fault as an individual, you know, and I certainly wasn't a global citizen, okay, because things were a little bit different back then. So what we're gonna do is do the work that you guys do as administrators. We're going to develop our own model, right? Okay? And in here, these policies require teacher input in that, right? I mean, that's gonna be part of it, okay?
Yeah, and the design team is made up of community members, business members, faith-based members, as well as teachers. Most excited about that our committee will be made up of at least 20% of our students. And so it's going to be our students, our staff, our administrators, our community coming to a decision on what are the most important skills that they want our students to be able to graduate with through their journey in Belton.
Now, are we gonna, just to give you an example, I told you about page 26, talks about quality character. Page 11, collaborator. When you look at paragraph 9, I mean, that's a collaborator. Number 10, that's the quality character. I mean, I can go through here and pick those out. So are we gonna rewrite this stuff to where it's gonna be in just another local policy? Is that what we're gonna do?
So we brought these to you as samples that could be impacted by this journey of a graduate document. And you had asked for us to, dive in and start examining that. And so these are examples that could be impacted.
Right.
I would say it comes down to this policy committee's decision on that one.
Right.
On whether or not we're going to rewrite and redo, to tweak, or to leave alone. But what I will say is if this matters the most to the community, then everything in our system should line up with that, right? If we're saying this is the direction that we're going forward, then we should take a look at policy EH that's up there and talk about curriculum development. And we should be very explicit about pieces of that policy that are directly aligned with the characteristics that you all adopt in that journey of a graduate.
Right.
And so I would say that there are a couple of policies, and that's what Melinda's gonna take us through here, a couple that we found in here that might be really important for us to dive into as a policy committee after that adoption has taken place.
And I think in some cases, it will be a matter of if it's the will of the board to even just add the language journey of a graduate in some of the policies. This policy, I wanted to start with this one because I do think this is one that potentially could be impacted. I don't know that the entire policy would have to be rewritten, but a lot of school districts that lack some form of a journey of a graduate, the focus is on state standards alone. And so when you look at curriculum documents, it's aligned to the TEKS. But what you won't often find if there's not a journey of a graduate is where the way in which teachers design work, still it's based and founded in standards, right, the TEKS, but the way in which they design and approach that learning could build skills in communication, could build collaboration skills, communication skills, whatever it is our community says is most important, then we want to make sure in the instructional design that we're designing work that actually gives students the opportunity to practice those skills and intentionally grow those skills. And so that is not explicitly in here and in the curriculum design, and so that's why this particular policy would need some potential revision if it's the will of the board to be intentional about aligning to those, again, skills or attributes that we develop in the journey of a grad.
Well, I think if we're not gonna be intentional about it, we shouldn't do it, right? I mean, so this is the roadmap.
This is where we're going.
Let's start to work backwards and make
Yep.
the changes we need to make working backwards.
Yep.
Throughout the entire system.
Chris, I think I made a comment before you walked in, correct me if I'm wrong, but when I read all of this that was given to us today, and then we were provided with the example of the Enrico School District's roadmap. If you look in here in these policies, a lot of what they have is in here, but it's on different pages here and there.
Mhm.
So my question is, I mean, it was a rhetorical question, so why do this?
Mhm.
If it's already in here, you just gotta find it.
Well, okay, you said rhetorical, I won't answer.
But I want you to comment on that. I mean, in other words,
Yeah.
do we rewrite things and then put it in one
So-
one spot, and we have a local policy that says, this is, just like Enrico, this is where,
Yeah.
this is what a kid, these are the skills we want a kid to have when he leaves,
Yeah.
he or she leaves Belton Independent School District.
Yeah, honestly, like I skimmed the policy, but I didn't like go through with a fine tooth comb because in my mind, it's good to know it's there, but I don't want to do anything with it until we know what we're shooting at,
Right.
right? Because we may actually be able to reuse some of that, right?
That's
The
right.
reason to go through the exercise is because, man, going through it in the policy as it's laid out here, not so visionary,
Right.
not so easy to digest, right? It's not, it's tough to chew on, right? So, yeah, I mean, I looked at it that way, like I skimmed through it to have awareness that it's there, but didn't try to put pen to anything to make a change. I don't know if that's helpful, but, yeah.
And I think the other thing that I would add, I think that, the role of policy in a school district is, that's a role of a board of trustees to adopt policy that makes your vision come to life in a system, and then we have to figure out how to make those things happen. And so if this is the will of the board of trustees and the community, when we get this profile at the end, or this journey document at the end, then by in very explicitly outlining it in policy, and those policies that might matter most, such as the first one that Melinda's got up here, EH, really should drive the work of everything that we do moving forward then. And it gives you the ability as a board of trustees to say, this is how we are prioritizing it, we're making these policy changes,
Yeah.
and then it's our job to figure out how to implement that through the classrooms.
Yeah, but I also see it as, okay, great, just because we have this finished document, well, now it's not policy time, right? Because I don't want to jump into policy time until we hand it over to our good friends in curriculum, and, right? And like, let them have a chance to digest it and like really sit back and understand, okay, great, what does this mean?
Absolutely.
Right? And we're gonna have to have lots of conversations between the time that, this thing is finished and drafted and the time that I think we do anything with a policy.
I agree
right?
with you on that.
Um,
Totally agree.
yeah.
There's gonna need to be a lot of eyes and a lot of bodies in the middle of these conversations, and, today you notice this was in a first draft. This is us showing you potential policies that could be implicated
Yeah.
to get that discussion going, because some of this work could really outline what the policy committee does for the next couple of years, just
Right.
being real blunt.
Yeah, but I would say the finished document, the final draft, it's almost like, okay, the chains are off.
Yeah,
Dr. Lovesmith, the chains are off,
yeah,
right? Dream. Okay, let's talk about what that dream is, and then let's go back and put it in policy so that we don't handcuff you with policy around the dreaming, right? I don't know, that's,
yep.
I want to ask Deanna a question. Deanna, in here on page 9 of our packet, there is a paragraph entitled Curriculum Philosophy. And it tells us what the purpose of education is.
Right.
And this may be a silly question for you guys, you educators, but nowhere in here was the term curriculum defined that I could see. So how would you define curriculum?
So I think that needs to be in that document, and I know that document says on the bottom that it was updated in 2017, but I've been here since 2011 and it's never had a major
That was one of my
revision.
questions later on.
Absolutely, and so I think we do have to define our curriculum, because we're provided by the state what we need to teach and what those
Right,
standards
right.
are.
But
But how we design it and how we organize it and how we prioritize it is a local.
because I think that the analysis starts there. I mean,
Absolutely.
how do we, unless I missed it, I didn't see where curriculum is defined in here.
Here's what I will say though, some districts already have that.
Okay,
in this local policy.
okay,
And so we have to get the ball rolling with what is it that we really want to create for kids?
Right, right.
And then take a look at all of those things in there. Yes, a definition of curriculum should be in there, but we are a standards-based curriculum. We teach more than the standards, and we always have, right? That's the way things go in public education.
Yeah.
So defining what that is and what those skills are and habits are that kids need to be successful for the future. And then talking about how it impacts curriculum, how it impacts assessment, how it impacts all of those things, I think is going to be a journey for
Well,
us.
because when the letter grades first came out, right, I mean, a lot of our conversation was around, okay, this letter grade's great, but we want a lot, like, it doesn't reflect everything we want out of our students, right? And this exercise gives us the chance to really articulate, well, these are those things that we want, above and beyond, yeah.
And
But-
I would also say this, like, I think that's a perfect example. So if our community says these things matter to us in Belton ISD, and this is what we want for our kids, these are what our hopes and dreams are, and this is the experience we want while they're in school, then our accountability to our public every year should be a report out on that.
Yes,
So
exactly.
every year you should have a state of the schools address that says, here's how we've done. And you should have a plan that helps you get there, hence the reason
And
we're.
our district improvement plan should line up to it,
Absolutely.
and, you know, yeah.
The other thing was, of course, the state tells you, hey, listen, you gotta do these things, okay? And in here, there's a spot where we're given some leeway in teaching certain courses. Are we going to have to make kids take certain things or certain courses now? By doing this, we're gonna give them less leeway in picking and choosing things?
Here's, oh, go ahead.
What I was gonna say is, there really is the potential to impact every single classroom and at every single level, no matter the content, and really look at how do we embed these skills, and it doesn't matter what you take as a student. So I don't think the intent is to limit student choice or to create a Journey of a Graduate course, for example. I mean, we have the ability to create local courses, but this is for each and every student and not just for students who would select a particular course. And so I think it just really has the potential to really impact each and every student, no matter their pathway, their selection, their level.
Yeah.
And that's on page 19 of the packet, where it says local credit. It says the district may offer courses for local credit at its discretion in addition to those in the required curriculum. So my question that I wrote earlier today was, how many of those courses are going to be impacted? I mean, there could be an impact on that, right?
There should be impact on every course,
Every course.
every course in our system.
Okay.
And I think that if you get to the real, like, so I've shared with the board a couple of videos about the world of work for the future and things like that. And if we start really talking about what do kids need when they leave our doors and enter into college or the workforce, it goes beyond the content learning and goes into skills that they're gonna need for an ever-changing future, right? Right now, we know collaboration might be one of the biggest skills that we need to develop in students throughout our system right now, based on the current environment that we're working in, right? We have to collaborate like we've never done before in our world. That should impact every classroom in the way we structure learning experiences and student experience for every classroom.
Yeah, like, I would say this, like, if you, unfortunately, I can't connect to the network for some reason, so I'm just going off the PDF packet. So like, what's on page 4 and 5, right, the sample profile of graduate, right, there's nothing in there, if we were to just say hypothetically, we adopted it like it is,
Right.
right, there's nothing in there that says anything about a particular class, right? It's all about how do you shape the content of the class to get that stuff out of it, right? And so I wouldn't see this as limiting student schedules. limiting opportunities, inventing new classes, right? It's how do you integrate it in so that while they're getting all the stuff that Texas says we gotta get from a knowledge standpoint, you get this other stuff out of it too, right? It should be additive, it shouldn't be subtractive in any way.
And it should be available to each and every student
Yeah,
in our
absolutely,
system.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Now, I could see maybe this team time could potentially have some stuff that incorporates some of this too,
Absolutely.
right? That's, I'm,
It's a whole nother, yeah.
that's still a mystery to me, we'll talk about that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think it's additive, not subtractive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking at these policies here, are there things that we're gonna have to, it seems to me we'll have to necessarily change, right?
Yeah, I'm willing to jump in on that.
Yeah, so EH was the first one. It's really one of our most comprehensive policies around curriculum instruction and assessment. And we do see that the development of a portrait of a graduate has implications for all three of those, and the importance of alignment between those three in particular. But like EHAA is legal, the reason I put that one in there is that one really speaks to instruction, and while you don't adopt legal policy is legal policy, we don't currently have a local policy. And this one really is about the instructional program. And so this is just an opportunity, again, to build a local policy that's just more explicit about, it's not just around state standards, but it's also around these additional skills. And so I put that one in there just to say we don't have a local, but we might want to consider one because it seems applicable. I just said EHA legal. EIA local, if you look at that one in particular looks at grading and progress report to parents. And so put this one in here because not to say we would recommend giving a letter grade to a student on whether or not they're growing as a communicator, for example. But we are going to have some conversations we'll have to have around, but would we like students to be able to set some goals and track progress? Would we want to be able to communicate with you as a parent where Melinda is strong, where she's growing against these skills in our portrait of a graduate?
And this goes to, I think, some of the new tech conversation as well, right? And so there are some, again, if we kind of use the sample as a guide, right? Like there are some things that are in that sample that we already are doing some pretty magical things, right, in some settings, in like new tech, right? So looking at this, we can say, hey, we really value that. We don't just want to do it at new tech. We should be doing it, like every student should get this opportunity, right? It should do it that way. So,
In this process helps us define those things,
right, exactly.
And then figure out ways to monitor progress on those for kids,
Right.
so that we can ensure that they're.
Yeah, I mean, there's gonna have to be some kind of metrics and, we're a long way from that, and yeah, we could do a State of the Union and
Absolutely.
here's how we're making progress. And
Absolutely.
here's a letter grade we give ourselves, in addition to Texas' letter grade.
And this letter grade might matter more than that letter grade. Sorry about that.
Another policy, it's a legal policy, it's EK legal. I put this one in here because this one is specific to local assessments. And so again, not suggesting a letter grade, but we may want to develop some rubrics and some performance-based assessments where we can actually see if students are growing in the skills that are identified. Again, not as a report card necessarily. I don't know what it could look like, but it could have some implications for how we communicate students' growth in these areas.
Let me ask this, right? So with I can't remember the official term, right? So what we're doing at like pre-K and K and 1 and a functional report, what do we call that?
Standards-based report card.
Right, the standards-based report card, right? I mean, nothing would stop us from potentially adding a couple things to that
Correct.
standards-based report card at that level to maybe hit some of these things that maybe aren't in the Ts,
Absolutely.
right? Now, I don't know how you take that pre-K to 12 at the moment, because, but we could do something like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the good news is there are states that actually are pushing some of that in state leadership around the nation on some of those things. So you actually have some states that have dabbled in this idea of grades and reporting progress to parents is more than just giving a letter grade or a number grade. It's actually saying, how are students progressing in meeting certain competencies along the way, right? Or certain progressions along the way in their learning experience according to the district. And they've defined some of those and are working on report cards and transcripts to help with that.
And EIE local was also put in here, and to your point, that's where you start to look at standards for mastery. Could be standards for growth around those skills within a journey of a graduate. So this one might have potential for being looked at through this process as well. I also put in BQ, BQA, and BQB. Those really have to do with planning and decision making. And so as we develop this journey of a graduate, this becomes like our vision for what we hope to and aspire to be able to develop in each and every student, then we feel like there might need to be some language in decision making around that and aligning that. So to your point earlier around district improvement plan, for example, campus improvement plans, there would be language in there around how are we creating the systems that help grow those skills or attributes in our students. And so we might want to consider looking at being explicit in some of that language in the B policies. BQ is just a broad planning and decision-making policy. BQA gets at the district level decision-making, and then the final one, BQB, gets at the campus level decision-making. So really just kind of looking at that alignment throughout the system in support of that journey of a graduate.
But there's nothing in the policy today that we would need to do in order to have the train continue down the tracks right now.
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Done.
There's no action that is needed to be taken tonight, but there is deep work by this policy
Yes.
committee that's coming forward.
Yeah.
And so as we begin to hear those conversations, I think they start, what is it, next week?
November 17th is our
November
first
17th.
design team meeting.
As those conversations start to happen, I think the lens that we have to have with policy on this is what kind of implications does this have at policy level in the school district? And being able to hear for those things and constantly look through these policies and think about things. We've talked about policy EIC local. And I think that's a great one for us to really wrestle with a little bit. And this talks about GPAs and weighting of grades and things like that. So if we get this document, the journey of a graduate, that guides us moving forward, we have to be able to then say, does this policy, in theory, in philosophy, line up with what we're trying to do for our kids in the school district? And if not, then we're gonna have to wrestle with those things. And so I think the big work for this committee is getting ready to be kicked off here over the next couple of years, and it's exciting times for my
So
board.
big work for more than the committee.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is everybody.
We may feel that.
You know, there's some things in here as I read through it, and this may be collateral to what we're doing, but we need to make sure that what's in here is we're actually doing it. You know, like Deanna said a moment ago. Deanna, if you look at page 12 of the packet, 5 of 10 of the curriculum design, it says at the top of that first paragraph, the document shall be revised and readopted by the board every 5 years or sooner as necessary. When was the last time that was done, do you know?
So I'm trying to follow along here.
It says 2017.
Which policy are you in?
It's
EH.
local,
Okay.
And on which page?
page 12.
So an EH logo.
Policy
5
5
of
of
10.
10.
5 of
They
10.
don't have paper manual, that's the problem. You're looking at paper and they're looking.
Oh,
Yeah,
shucks.
we can see it right up
So
there.
I think I have the right page on here, is that
Yep.
what you're after?
Yeah, just scroll up a little bit.
Okay, so
Yeah,
I
yeah.
would,
The other way?
Yeah, the other one.
so how I would answer that is that
Are we there?
any
Yeah.
large resources that we use, or planned courses, we're actually going to the board annually on. So our new courses, every year I come with new courses. Any curriculum or curriculum changes that we're making come to the board. And so we don't do it as a whole document every 5 years. We come every year with just those changes.
That's it.
So in some districts that have gone through this, then that begs the question, and this is a good policy level question, what's the board's role in adopting, quote, adopting curriculum, right? Is it that you are adopting the resource, which is what Deanna just described? Are you adopting the resource that's used, like the book that's used to be taught in the classroom? Are you adopting the actual map of the curriculum or the curriculum documents that the teaching and learning department put out to teachers? Or are you adopting a philosophy behind it all? And
Right.
so there are certain things I think that you just pointed out a perfect example. That's in there. That can be interpreted many different ways, and you can very easily probably say, we bring to you new courses every year, but we don't bring to you every 5 years every course.
Right.
So,
But we
Absolutely.
do bring to the board a certification that we have resources to sufficiently cover and support all of our state standards.
That's
So that could be part of the interpretation as well.
Yeah. I mean, for what it's worth, I think I think the board should be looking at the philosophy. There's enough doctorate degrees in this room, in the field, that I don't carry. Right? The specifics, that's on you guys.
Right.
Right? We should be the philosophy.
Yeah.
And Texas tells us what we have to teach them, so I can't do anything about that, right? At least the minimum.
Mhm.
What are the board's stated curriculum goals?
So I think that's a great question for me as a superintendent right now. I don't know that I understand that from our board. I don't think that has been clearly articulated.
That was another rhetorical question.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
I
I
don't
mean,
know the answer to that.
I don't either. That's what I mean. I don't think that they've been clearly articulated, and I don't think we've engaged in that discussion.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think to some extent, that's why I've been so passionate about wanting to get through this exercise.
Yeah.
Right, because it does set the vision, right? Because I think in the past, at least my short past, 2.5 years, right, it's always been, hey, look, we've got the system in place and whatever, and this is what we're doing. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how it's been, and maybe that was okay. But this is, I feel like, the first time, at least in my 2.5 years, that there's some participation in the vision.
Yeah.
Right, wrong, or different,
That's on page 8, 1 of 10 of the packet. At the very top, curriculum development and implementation. So when I was reading these things, I was making notes in the margin, this is what was going through my mind at the time. And I'm the youngest guy, well,
I don't know about that.
yeah. Let me rephrase that. I have been on the board the least amount of time than anyone else, how about that? I think I'm the oldest, actually.
Oh, we're not gonna go there.
Yeah.
We got to stay out of that discussion. That makes
Yeah.
No, I am the oldest, actually. It says at the top, the design and implementation of the curriculum shall be consistent with the board's stated curriculum goals and objectives. So I put over here in the margin, which goal?
Mhm.
I don't know, I don't
Well,
know. I mean,
I submit to you that we're about to figure that out.
That's right.
Well,
And that's the journey we're going on.
But obviously it
Yeah.
concerns me that I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, that's my point here.
Yeah. Well, so let's say we don't have one. Let's just for argument's sake, say we don't have it documented anywhere, what do? We can't do anything until we get through the section, like we've got to
Right,
figure it out
right,
somehow,
right,
right?
right.
So,
So that part may or may not change, so there's a lot of things that are gonna, there's a lot of interaction here within these policies.
Absolutely.
Um,
And I will say this, Melinda gave you probably the meatiest one for the first one right there. So if you're going through those 10 pages, there's a lot of heavy lifting in that one.
Because once we look at that one and refine that one, then that informs those other policies that were presented this evening. So this is the most important one.
If I can add one thing, so imagine at the top of that policy, that at the beginning of that policy EH local, that it very clearly says, the purpose of the curricular experience at Belton ISD is to create student learning that promotes problem solving, creative thinking, whatever those things are that you that you end up adopting in the journey of a graduate. That clearly says what the goal is in all of our learning experiences moving forward, and it's clearly articulated in policy. Those are the types of changes that we're going to end up having to wrestle with.
Look, and when I look at this, it's everywhere,
Mhm.
you know. Well, let me go on page 5, and I need to go page 10. So it should be, if I'm on page 5, then it should naturally flow. Dan, I have another question for you.
Okay.
Page 9, 2 of 10 of the curriculum. And tell me, if I'm getting off track here, let me
You're
know.
doing great. This is exactly what we wanted you to engage in.
The heading is curriculum philosophy, that we were in there, the purpose of education, remember?
Mhm.
Okay, go down 2 paragraphs, or the second paragraph, to assure that students leaving the district schools possess the skills and knowledge to have successful experiences in higher education and in the workplace, which is what we're doing here, right? A model of continuous progress based on vertically aligned learning objectives and indicators of student performance shall be used. What does it mean by vertically aligned learning objectives? What does that mean?
So we're aligning from kindergarten to first grade to second grade to third grade. So there's a vertical alignment and then there's a horizontal. So horizontal is across a grade level. So that would be like across third grade, and then vertical would be grown up. So when we design our curriculum, we're looking at what students had in third grade and fourth grade to build for fifth grade skills. And like if we were writing fifth grade curriculum.
That's a pretty silly question, wasn't it?
No, it's
No,
a great
no,
question.
that's a great
It's an
question.
outstanding question.
Yeah, and think about CTE, right? The paths, the pathways that you have to
Correct.
go down for a particular CTE, right? It goes in a progression, right? That's part of that vertical alignment too.
So one we were just working on last year to just expand how this works is in our fine arts programs and in band, and looking at, do our sixth grade, are they looking at the same way to count music that they're gonna count at their
Right.
feeder high school?
That's a great example.
And are they gonna have, do they leave eighth grade with the base level of some songs when they get, because you know, there's such a short time between freshmen and starting band practice and their first football
Yeah.
game. And so that was work we were doing last year, and that's just different from, you know, we so think about like ELA and math and science, but it's everything.
Well, I mean, it also falls into athletics.
It
I mean,
it
we're
really
starting to see
does,
that happen,
but
right? I mean, it's all aspects of the district that happen.
correct.
Yeah, or at least it should be if you really want the best out of it, right?
The other thing, and I keep looking at this thing as a whole, okay, I try to look at the big picture, and I ask myself this question: who's delivering the goods? And the teachers are the ones delivering the goods, right? Okay. So if I were a teacher and I was to read all this, I don't know, it doesn't flow right. You know what I'm saying? I thought, well, wait a minute, what am I supposed to do? Over here it says on page 16, 9 and 10, it says, I've got to teach the curriculum and then they got to test the teaching. I mean, that was my summary of that. So it says here on page 13, 6 of 10, it says, curriculum documents shall serve as a framework from which a teacher shall develop units of study, individual lessons plans, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, if these policies are gonna, if we're gonna get on this roadmap, the roadmap needs to make sense, okay? So when a teacher reads it, the teacher says, okay, I know what I gotta do, okay? And one of the things we're struggling with right now, this is kind of a side issue, but when you did those surveys, a lot of them talking about time right now. Of course, we're in a horrible situation right now with this COVID situation, but in here it says that, you know, teachers need to have time to do what they need to do. I mean, that's what our policies say, okay? So I just wanted to make that comment about what I see here, okay? So if I'm thinking as a teacher, of course, I'm not an educator by any stretch of the imagination, but just listening to you guys, if I'm the one delivering the goods, if I'm the one that's going to try and get to these goals that we've created here, then you got to tell me exactly what I need to do, and you got to give me the resources to do that.
Yeah, so, but I would argue that this document, and this document, I mean like the board policy, that's not the document to do it. Like, a classroom teacher should not go to the board policies and procedures and say, this is how I'm gonna do that stuff, right? So there's the interim, or in the middle, there's all the curriculum stuff, right, that the district develops. That's okay, how are we gonna take the vision from the board policy and the board procedure and all that kind of stuff? How are we gonna take that, and how are we actually gonna bring that to life?
Right.
That's where the teacher should be going. They shouldn't be going to this document. And I don't, that's me, correct me if I'm wrong.
Well,
Um,
but for argument's sake, I mean, teachers obviously need to read these things, okay? And then, I mean, if I'm a teacher.
I don't know, I'd almost argue, I don't know. I could argue the opposite maybe.
Well, they need to know how these are gonna impact them, okay? I would say that. The other thing is that, you know, we got a string on resources here,
Yeah.
okay? So, and then Max mentioned this before in other meetings. This is a program-driven budget, right? You've talked about that.
I have.
It's kind of like Congress, you know, it says, well, you need to do these things or I'm gonna pull your funds,
Mhm.
okay? So we need to know where we're gonna put money so that we can reach these goals that we're gonna develop,
That's
right?
Yes,
And that's gonna impact the way teachers deliver things.
Absolutely.
yes.
And
That's what I'm
supplies that
saying.
they need, and resources in the classroom to include desks and supplies
Right.
and equipment, and yeah, it could have a wide-ranging impact.
Yeah, okay.
And hey, and the reality is too, we're not gonna be able to get there in 1 year.
No.
I mean, this is a multi-year
Yes.
effort to get there and implement.
So one of the things that
I'm
I
super
think,
psyched if you can't tell.
I think it's really exciting work, but I think we also need to go into it with eyes wide open because it's hard work.
Yeah.
And the reason I say it like that is so we're gonna have to get into this discussion about what role does policy really play in a school district? Like TASB language probably says something like policy is a way that boards describe what they want from administration in the school district, right? This is what you all adopt. This is where the board lives, is really in the governance lane of managing a school district. So it outlines, hey, we want these experiences for kids, and we want this curricular experience, and we want administrators to do these things. It gives us the framework. We then take all of that, and like Chris just mentioned, those curriculum documents, our administrative regulations, all of the process pieces that Mike works on operationally, those are all the things that we make that policy come to life through all those other documents. And we're gonna have to wrestle with how specific we want policy to really be. I do agree with you. There are certain policies in a school district that I think teachers do need to know. And one of those is probably the philosophy of curriculum when you adopt it, right? Like, when you're pointing this out in here, I don't know if any teacher in this district has ever gone to policy EH and said, well, what's our philosophy of curriculum in Belton ISD? That's probably a pretty important conversation for us.
But I think if they can't get it anywhere else and have to go to this document, we failed somewhere.
We have failed. I agree.
Right, like, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Man, this is gonna be hard.
But
You
this
know,
is what it's all about.
Yeah, I mean, if I were, well, true, but if I were an educator, it'd be a little bit easier, so we're gonna have to rely on you guys tremendously with this, because, I ain't got no skills in this area. You know
I
what I'm
think
saying?
you
No, you absolutely do.
I think you do.
You absolutely do. Like the way that you went through that document, we need that skill.
Absolutely.
I'm not going through the document the same way as you are.
Yeah,
Right?
So I don't, you know, and sometimes I think that maybe I'm being a little bit too, you know, harsh on these things. I pick
Yeah.
things to death, you know, and I'm thinking, well, maybe should I back up a little bit?
No.
No, that is why you're such a valuable member of the team of 8, right? Like
Okay.
everybody brings something different, and so you're critical to it.
Well, okay, so along those same lines, well, let's go.
I'll let you go.
Let's go to page 16, 9 and 10, curriculum development cycle. Deanna, correct me if I'm wrong, but have we, those 2 paragraphs there, especially the second one, the superintendent shall take steps whenever possible to conduct the curriculum review each year. Well, when is it not possible to do that? I mean,
It's a challenge in a pandemic.
right, but I mean, before that,
We're still doing it. I mean, even in the pandemic, we had to look at it a different way. Like where were essential skills that were missed in the curriculum? Where do we need to push something in? And so I feel like we're doing this with our teachers annually as we go through. We're trying to get to a cycle where when we finish a unit, we're getting that feedback and then going to that next unit.
I mean, just within the last year, we just did, what was it, all the ELA stuff maybe?
So
or-
the other piece, so there's two
I
pieces,
think.
there's complete
standards.
revision
Yeah.
and then there's like annual maintenance is what I would call it. And so when TEKS are readopted or a new resource is adopted, then there's gonna be a complete revision. Like
Right.
right now, we're in the process of adopting a pre-K resource. So as soon as we decide what that key resource is, we're going to look at our documents again. They're not resource specific, but we definitely want to make sure things are aligning.
Right.
And so we do that anytime there's new TEKS revisions.
Yeah.
And those are, at the state.
But then the exercise of the journey of a graduate will also be another input into that process.
Absolutely.
The next time we do it, right,
Absolutely.
to figure out, okay, great, like which tools can we use to help us get there?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
how would we align our courses and how would we evaluate courses and assess courses and absolutely.
Right now, the way we have things, the way you've structured things, Matt, who's the direct supervisor of a principal? Would it be,
Arturo and Gabby.
okay. So, I thought about him whenever thought about them whenever I was looking at this. On page 15, which is 8 of 10, talking about role responsibilities.
Yep.
And it says here, the building principal is the key to the monitoring and implementation of the curriculum. Here's that curriculum again.
Mhm.
The principal must translate this importance to staff members on a daily basis. Is that done on a daily, that's done on a daily basis?
To me, that takes place during what often you'll hear called a professional learning community. It's a collaborative time for teachers to come together
Uh-huh.
around the curriculum and
Uh-huh.
around the lesson plan design that curriculum is supporting.
I see, okay. And then on the next page, at the top, it says, the supervisor of the principal shall evaluate the principal's records of classroom monitoring instruction. That's changed a little bit under our hierarchy now, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and I'll be real honest with you, I don't like that language at all.
That's why I'm pointing it out.
That's one of those things that I think we've got to dive into that a little bit
Right.
and really think about the culture that we want to create in all of this.
Right, and that's why I asked you that question,
Yeah.
because as I've told you before, you administrators have to tell us, hey, this dog ain't hunting no more,
Right.
okay? We need to change something, okay? So how are we gonna know, because we don't know, and you get it from the boots on the ground, right?
Yep.
So we're not gonna know unless somebody stops us in Walmart and complains about it, right?
Which they do every now and then.
Yeah, every once in a while, but, you know.
That's never happened. And definitely not in the produce aisle.
No. And you're reaching for the zucchini, right?
So what on my wish list would be that you guys are going through this and saying, look, this is working, this ain't working, this is gonna be an impediment to what we need to do and what we're trying to get. I'm not gonna know that unless you say that.
So what I would anticipate is that we will take some of these policies moving forward as this journey of a graduate comes to life, is I guess the best way to put it. And we're gonna bring it to you, and we're gonna probably dive into individual policies in depth here and ask you all questions. What are your thoughts on this? What do you feel? Here's some ideas from us. We'll probably give you samples from other school districts to look at too, ones that are more tailored, I think, for some specific needs that we might be exploring in the future. And I think those types of things will make this a working group and a policy group rather than us just coming and presenting to you and saying this is what needs to be done.
And you and I have talked about it before, we don't wanna, I don't want you to give me something and go, and then we go,
Right.
okay,
Right.
next.
Right.
I mean, what good are we doing you?
Well, and truthfully, what we talk about a lot as an administrative team, policy is where the board lives. Like that is your role in a school district is governance.
I think that's what the law says, isn't it?
It is. And so we want to set that up right and say, let's engage in good, meaningful, deep discussions about these policies to help us make this vision of what you want for public schools and what our community wants for public schools come to life. And hopefully we can get it in policy, we can get it clear. 10 pages for one policy is a pretty long policy, and you just talked about it, you had different sections all through it. It's hard to digest.
It is hard to digest.
So-
You know, and I mean, I've got other things in here, but, you know, I don't think there's any need for me to do that. I was just giving you examples
Yeah.
of things that,
Yeah.
as I read through this, it just causes me some concern. Good, bad, or indifferent, it's just something that I think needs to be addressed.
I think you're right on the money.
Deanna, you're a curriculum person.
I
At
am.
least as long as I've been on this thing, we've been a curriculum person. I mean, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on this.
I think the whole policy needs revision, and I thought that, but we need to have I think what's determined in the board's direction with journey of a graduate, this policy is greatly impacted by.
So our analysis starts with, we've got to get the
Where do we
gotta
want-
get the goals in place, right? And then we kind of work from there backwards, right? Is
I
that-
think that's what we want for our kids.
I think it's
mean,
gonna be
when
most
you think
productive.
about a child and they could spend 13 years in our system. I mean, a kid that starts with us in pre-K and goes through their senior year, and there'll be kids all along the way that are here for shorter times, but ideally, I mean, we could have 13 years, and what are we producing in the end for that commitment we've made to that child, and how are we getting there along the way, and what experiences are we providing them, and what's important, and then this policy drives that, so that when we hire teachers, you mentioned earlier about there was some discussion on do they or do they not look at this board policy, well, in the end, the board policy is existing because it says to our teachers, this is what our board expects us to do.
Yeah.
And we've agreed on that, and it doesn't matter who comes and goes in my position or teacher's position. This is what our district will do.
You know, when I looked at these goals from Enrico, I thought, man, if I'd have had all of that whenever I graduated, well, I'd have been a superstar. You know? I mean, things would have been a lot easier in transition in college. Of course, I'm a product of BISD, and I am forever thankful for what they did for me, but they gave me other things that are not necessarily this, that kind of blossomed later.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
That was something I wanted to add, is it's not that they walk across the stage and it's done, right? That those skills have developed. We want them to grow throughout that whole journey, but we want them to be set up well for continued growth in those areas. You know, I think about the communicator one, with practice in a job, if I'm in a job where I have to speak to a board or to a community, those skills will continue to grow. We just want to be very intentional about growing them through our
Sure.
system, so that they're prepared for whichever direction they go after graduation.
It's, you know, which seeds do we want to plant
Mhm.
that, given the right conditions, are going to grow, right? And continue to grow.
Man, I remember in ninth grade, I did a report on the squirrel,
Mhm.
and I did, I really did. So what did I pulled this Encyclopedia Britannica. I remember, you're too young for all that.
No, I remember.
Was it
I had a
World
big
Book or
shelf of
something?
those out
Yeah,
there.
at home, and I remember going up.
we have
I
some.
was- I was absolutely terrified to go up in front of the class, most of them friends, and read the report. I couldn't believe it.
Yep.
I mean, it was horrifying, okay? And now, that's what I actually
That's what
do.
you do.
Yeah, that's what you do for a living.
Yeah, it's kind of strange, isn't it? I mean, it's so, I always look and say, heck, if I did it, these kids can certainly do it, right?
And I think one of the things that you never would have predicted that when you were, in what grade did you say, ninth grade?
Ninth grade,
You
oh,
never would
no.
have predicted that, right? And so being able to prepare kids for things that they can't predict right now, and truthfully, for jobs that we can't predict right now, is a big part of our work. And it's about not only content learning, so I, sitting with my daughter, listening to her do homework last night, and there's good content that needs to be learned, and I agree with that. But I also think that in this information age, we have kids that can look up and get that content information more readily than people ever dreamed 10 years ago. And so now we got to think through what are those skill development pieces, like I was trying to teach my daughter how to filter out the good junk on the internet and the bad junk on the internet, because there's a lot of junk, right?
Yeah.
But being able to get to what a real source is and to be able to really find fact in the world of this information age is a skill that I don't know if we've really even begun tapping into yet. And so we've got to figure those things out.
But you know what? I think that the athletics, the things that I learned in athletics allowed me to overcome that fear. You know? You gotta do what you gotta do to do what you wanna do, right?
Yeah. I think it's a really good example, because I think a lot of kids will tell you that the most memorable, or adults will tell you the most memorable part of their schooling experiences aren't necessarily a content learning experience sitting in a classroom, but it's about how they interacted with kids to accomplish some goal, or teachers to accomplish some goal. And those are some of the skill development pieces that I think are pretty important.
You know, it traumatized me because I remember the grade, and I remember what report it was on, and where I got the information, right? Squirrel.
It must have traumatized
Ninth
them.
grade. Yeah, biology, Mr. Critchfield's class.
Oh, no. We just dropped it on the camera. There you go.
Wow.
You know what? It might have been this room. It was on this hallway.
It's come
That's
full
probably
circle.
why Amanda's
Full
coming back
circle,
to
right
you,
here.
because you're in the
I
room.
feel it.
It was in this hallway.
I feel it.
That's great.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
That's funny.
Mike, what do you have to?
He thinks we're all crazy.
I mean, you
I want to hear the report on the squirrels.
know, I was so terrified. I was like this, just reading it. And Mr. Critchfield says, you know, you kind of need to talk about it. You kind of look up once in a while. I said, I couldn't do it. So anyway,
Well, obviously, you have that skill development along the way. That's great.
Mike, you were in athletics a long time, and you've been in this new job for a good while now. I mean, what are your thoughts on all this as you listen to this discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be intriguing when we get the input from all the stakeholders that are going to be part of the process, how much crossover we're going to see between what's actually going on in the classroom, what's going on teams, what's going on in extracurriculars, what's going on in our electives and our CTE programs and ROTC and in a preschool classroom. And I think we're going to see a lot of overlap, that the benefit that we want to see a student get from their experience here at Belton is going to be across the board. I don't think it's going to be limited to an instructional setting or an extracurricular setting or a club setting or anything. I think it's going to be the overall experience that we want our kids to have whenever they finish. It's going to be exciting. I think that's what's going to be one of the greatest parts about getting that many different viewpoints to the table. It's not going to be just educators or just students or just parents. It's going to be a good cross-section of our community.
Right. You know, what I'd like to see, Melinda, Deanna, what I'd like to see when a kid leaves here, I want them to think like I did. Say, you know what? BISD did me right.
Yeah,
That's what I want them to say when they leave here.
they prepared me for my
They
future.
prepared me, BISD did me right, and I can tell you to this day, BISD did me right. And that was in 1980 when I graduated. So, you know, it feels good to play a part in that, okay? Because, gosh, it's that first step when you walk out there and get into the real world, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, anything else, Matt, on the agenda that we need to? You're fixing to drop something on us.
I
I'm
am.
gonna show you a video.
Thought this would be good if I could find the right one, but I'm not finding it right now.
It's not, it looks like it's the future of work. Will our children be prepared?
This one?
Yes. Yeah.
There it is.
That's good.
Sure.
That's scary right there.
Yeah, very.
Sometimes it feels like that's happening, I'll tell you that.
Okay, Connie, you can stop it there. So I just showed that real quick, just because that's a perfect example of, we don't know what our kids are gonna be faced with in the workforce moving forward. We know what content the state says, but we also know that there's skill development that's gonna need to be cultivated and created through experiences in schools for our kids. And so this journey of a graduate is really helping to start to talk about what are those experiences that matter most to our community moving forward. I think that's an intriguing video. I agree and disagree with some of it. I'm still blown away by the fact that an Amazon drone delivery, like you could click and it was delivered to a house within 13 minutes of buying something. Or the Amazon store, and I think Melinda's actually visited.
Yeah, after I saw this video, I was in New York visiting my daughter, and I saw that store. So I just had to go experience it for myself, and literally walked in because of an app, put stuff in a basket, and walked out, and it was charged to the account. I liked it a lot, and so my husband did wonder why I went there so many times. But it was just such an intriguing experience, and you know, I've watched people's reactions to this, and sometimes people look at it and are like, where are the people? And there are people behind every bit of this, right? There are designers, there are thinkers, there are not just design from a technology perspective, but design from an artistic perspective. And so we can't lose sight that there are skills and humans behind all of that work.
And so part of our challenge in all of this is gonna be, how do we create the learning experiences for kids to prepare them for whatever that could be for the future? But then for this committee in particular, how does policy impact that? And how, I guess maybe a better word isn't impact, but how does policy positively set that up? So we're excited. We appreciate you diving into this a little bit. Today was really about opening up this conversation. You and I talked a while ago about just starting to get this open and talking about how the journey of a graduate could impact policies, or vice versa, how policies could impact the journey of a graduate. And I think next month or the month after here, we're going to be bringing back EIC Local for a first discussion. And we're going to engage in something similar. It's not going to be that we're going to bring you something to say, please go approve this right away. We're actually going to probably look at a couple of different things to start studying and figuring out, does this align with the philosophy of the board, and is this the experience you want for kids? And obviously that'll tie in with that journey of a graduate too.
It's gonna take a collaborative effort. That's one of the.
Yes, yes, you got it.
Collaborator.
Yes,
So we're all gonna have to be collaborators.
that's right. It's gonna be fun.
Okay, anything else on any of the items? No one? Elizabeth, you got anything to add to this thing?
I'm excited to get the journey started.
Any issues, concerns for the future that we need administrative reports on or anything? Chris? No? All right, looks like we've got a lot of work ahead of us. All right, I guess we stand adjourned.